I remember during my years of practice in India, one of the most common refrains of my teacher Govindaji expressing the teachings, there was one line which he must have said 10,000 times. You know, it was just so imbued in my practice and understanding. He would say, empty phenomena rolling on. That's all that's happening. It's just empty phenomena rolling on. You know, all the thoughts and feelings and everything in our experience, empty phenomena rolling on. You know, so it really was highlighting that wisdom or ultimate perspective. There's really nothing substantial there. And the whole teaching is about just not clinging, not holding on. So that's where kind of my deepest connection was for all those years of practice in India. And coming back, this is in 1974, coming back and beginning to teach in this country, that was my first approach. Anybody would come, you know, in an interview and with whatever problems they were having, oh, it's just empty phenomena. And it worked for a little while. You know, people didn't quite know what it meant, and so I think just the curiosity factor got me in a little way. But it didn't take too long to realize something else was needed. You know, even though that is the heart of the more ultimate expression of the Dharma, there's a lot more going on, especially entering into this world of lay practitioners. And one of the first big insights for myself, anyway, was that within our society, really the paradigm for inner investigation is a psychological one. You know, that's how we think of how to understand ourselves. And there's, you know, a tremendous sophistication, psychological sophistication that has developed, you know, in our society. But I was not trained as a therapist. That wasn't my world. My world was empty phenomena rolling on. So those first years, there was really a learning of just opening up. Okay, well, what does all this mean? Well, you know, what's happening on the psychological level with people as they come with their various experiences, and how can I relate to that and open to the particular content and the particular stories of what people bring without drowning in them, you know, without getting overwhelmed by them. So that was a huge step, just opening to a new expression, a new way of sharing the Dharma. It had to be a little more inclusive of our inner experience than what we dealt with in Asia. And then there were all kinds of social issues, which, you know, may very well have been present in Asia, but were not addressed. So, again, I remember very clearly coming back in 1974 and teaching at the Naropa Institute. And it was, at the time, I don't exactly know the timeline of this, but the women's movement was growing and strong, and a lot of strong women practitioners at that time. And I remember speaking to Mirabai Bush, who some of you may know. She's a very activist, Dharma person, leading the Contemplative Mind in Society organization. And we were just, both of us were recently back from India, and I kept thinking, you know, the Four Noble Truths, it's not men, it's not women, it's just the Four Truths. What's the story with all this women stuff? So that, quickly found out. And even just what in looking back now seem like the most simple things. But for me at that time, I was was just completely unconscious about. But I remember there was one yogi in particular who was just on my case in those early years in giving Dharma talks for including both pronouns in the talk, because in growing up, it was always just he, I never thought about it. It was outside the range of what I was wearing. So that was just the beginning, and now of course it's getting more inclusive than that. It's he, it's she, it's they. There are many ways of expressing one's identity. And then we started having women's retreats at INS. And I thought, well, isn't the Dharma just the same for everybody? But it became increasingly clear. There's this basically 70% of the INS population, women coming on retreat. And there are particular ways of talking about the Dharma and sharing the Dharma which are supported in that kind of environment, where it's just retreat for women. So that was a kind of big opening. Very different than how we learned in India. It was beginning to weave together the relative and the more ultimate, and how each has to be addressed in its own terms. And then there was the move, was it 2002? When Gina and I and some others and Ralph started leading the people of color retreats, first at Garrison and then at INS. So that was the beginning of a huge, huge opening and learning curve, which was still very much on in terms of, okay, how is the Dharma, how do we bring the big community of people of color, really having an access for all, not only physical access, but emotional, connected access, where the teachings are expressed in ways that can be heard and understood, and the problems, not only what individuals may bring, but the huge systemic problems in our society, which affect all of our lives. This has to be brought into the Dharma. So this has been huge, and as I said often, for myself, it was shocking for me to realize how unaware I had been of all this for most of my life. And so just beginning to get inklings of this whole world of genuine diversity and inclusion, and what were the barriers to it. So all this is part of the transmission of the Dharma to the West. That really, it was not happening in the ways we were practicing in Asia. In there, it was just empty phenomena rolling on. So there's been, over these 40 years, I've just seen our understanding of the Dharma and how we hold it, and the commitment to inclusion, absolute inclusion. It's tremendous. It's a tremendous direction to be taken. Of course, there's a huge amount of work yet to be done, but it feels like there's this very strong commitment to it, and a lot of learning in the process, and a lot of dukkha in the process as we face the different elements, both within ourselves and in our society. So this has been a big thing. And then, of course, there's the huge movement of secular mindfulness. So this has just taken off. When we came back from Asia in the 70s, people hardly even knew what the term mindfulness meant. I mean, it wasn't a word in our culture. And now we can't escape it. We might want to escape it in some situations. It's that's mindfulness every place. So this is a huge spread of the teachings. But what I find interesting now, having gone through this whole trajectory, from that, more targeted teachings of India, of empty phenomena rolling on, through the opening to all the ways we have to incorporate the psychological, the emotional, gender identity, the racial issues, everything. How we have to include it all in the way we're teaching and practicing. And now with this huge move across the whole country, secular Buddhism, in some way I feel we need to relink back to kind of how it was originally taught in Asia to us. And what I mean by that is not leave aside everything we've learned, but having learned and continuing to learn everything we have, can we now reroot it in the teachings of liberation? Because it will be very easy, and we can see it happening already, in the widespread secularization of mindfulness, which is a great thing. This is helping a lot of people. But it's not necessarily connected to the potential of awakening, the potential of enlightenment, and really getting at the essence of what the Buddha's teaching is about. So can we incorporate everything we learn and the expansiveness of the current vision of what's happening? Can we re-ground it now back in the teachings that actually free the heart and mind? And in this way, mindfulness becomes much more than a simple technology for getting a little more balanced in life. It really is the vehicle for awakening. And I feel an important part of this stage in this whole transmission of the last 40 years is to re-imbue the teachings with this essential core value of liberation.